Hey, how's it going? It's the middle of the year. So I'm going to do the mid-year freakout tag because I did it last year, it was kind of fun. And it's a good way of assessing how I'm doing, you know, both in terms of my YouTube, BookTube channel and my reading year. So got myself some coffee. It could get long. Let's just relax and see how we get on, shall we? I'm going to start off by going through some stats. So I'm going to use the story graph and my Notion tracker just to show you the stats for the year so far, and then I'm going to go through a bunch of questions which I used last year. I got them off the Mild Rumpus, and I'll put the questions below in case you want to tag yourself and do this as well. I will be showing you some physical books because I've got some of them here, but I didn't get all of them because if I got all the ones I'm going to talk about, I'd be swamped and my desk would probably collapse. So I'll put pictures up on the screen when I'm talking about book covers and stuff that I don't have to hand. So let's take a look at the stats. First of all, so here we are in the story graph. Current reading streak, 184 days. Doesn't mean a great deal because I read every day and it's not really a challenge. And if I don't read, then so what? But it's there. It logs it for me. 35 books, 15,000 pages. Again, I'm not really about the numerical stats. It's not about quantity. But still, that's quite a lot of books. Moods, we've got, these are like, you know, when you go into Storygraph, you enter a book, when you finished it, you get these check boxes that you can choose to say what kind of mood the book was. So I've got reflective, dark, adventurous, challenging, etc, etc. You can see the pie chart. It's not a particularly interesting stat, I don't think. Pace, again, don't really care. Page numbers, yeah, some chunkers. We've got about 1/3 split between 300, 500 and 500 plus. Fiction, non-fiction, so yeah, that seems about right. That's quite a good split. I am enjoying non-fiction, particularly Russian history, Soviet history, that kind of thing. You can click on it and I'll tell you what's here. Look at that. Here's my non-fiction. Yeah, I enjoyed these at different levels. Stalin's Children, we'll get to that one when we're discussing books. Poetry, so that's technically not non-fiction, is it? Not sure. So we've got, yeah, it's just split between fiction and non-fiction. In my Notion tracker, you'll see that I've got fiction, non-fiction and poetry. Genre, classics are beating fantasy. I think this time last year fantasy was way in the lead. And we got classics 14. Wow. Literary 8. And then we go to fantasy 7. Matching the history genre 7 as well. Some of these are applied automatically by Storygraph, and I do have my own personal tags as well, which are these ones here. So you'll see I've done a bunch of read-alongs this year. Some of them I've led myself. In fact, I think 2, Crime and Punishment and Oblomov. And then 2 would be Jared Henderson, which was The Dispossessed, and Henry Elliott, which was Mrs. Dalloway. And I've had one book out the library. I haven't been tagging my Libby loans with library, so maybe I should do that as well, because that is a stat I would like to track. Format, don't think this is accurate because most of the time, actually no, most of the time I'm reading print, so in that regard it's accurate, but quite a lot of the time I tandem read, or I'll listen to an audiobook when I'm out and about, and then when I get home I'll pick up the physical book. So yeah, it's not that interesting a stat really, doesn't matter. Most read authors, this is interesting, Susan Cooper 3, so we'll get to why that is. Stephen King 2. He has now just edged his way into first place of my all-time stats. So he's just taken the lead. No, it was joint, Stephen King and Stephen R. Donaldson. Stephen King's just taken the lead. And Owen Matthews, yeah, we'll get to that as well. All books in this time period are in English, and then some squiggles. Star ratings, 12 books at 5 stars. That's pretty good, isn't it? That's a good year. Let's take a look at what they might be. Yeah, okay. So you can expect to hear about some of these in the questions section. Yeah, that's a good year, I think, to be midway through the year and have 12 5-star books. Happy with that. So that's the story graph. Let's take a look at this. So I've got 2 tabs, I've got 2 pages in my Notion database, which does get a bit confusing because I can't remember which page has got certain filtered views. I should consolidate it, but here we are. So graphs for the current year. So here are my authors. As you just saw, the top 3 of them were listed in the story graph. All the rest are just 1. Genre, yeah, you saw that also in the story graph, but I do enjoy keeping this stat in my own database. Rereads, right, this is a big important one for me. I reread quite a lot, and you'll see here that out of 35 books, 80% are books I've read only once. So that's actually quite high. I normally have more rereads than that, and I've got some rereads planned for the rest of the year. So is it a good? That's not really a good or a bad thing, it's just a thing that I like to track. And we've got 3 books that I've read 3 times. What would they be? Crime and Punishment, Eye of the Tiger, and Oblomov, 2 of which are favourites. Eye of the Tiger was just an audiobook indulgence for driving, and it's an audiobook that, in fact, it was my very first audiobook when I was a kid. I listened to it when I was delivering papers on my BMX, having borrowed it. No, I think my dad borrowed it from Prestwick Library, and then I borrowed it off him. Year published, that's a stat I like to track as well. Looks like 1974 was a popular year. What do we have there? The Dispossessed, The Eye of the Tiger, and Greenwich. See, I love databases like this where you can do this kind of thing. You'll see there's only 1 book published this year, which actually I just finished this morning, quite literally. 2 of last year's, Poems in Gilgamesh. So yeah, you can see that I tend not to read current releases or new releases. So not sure why that is. It's just how it is. And then I've got this creators database down here where I track births and deaths of authors, and I wish Notion would allow you to do more of a zoom in with this. So Notion, please, in your Gantt charts, please allow us to extend the view so that we can get something more like this, because I find it extremely useful. You can see straight away what literature falls under the Victorian period, which is a stat I like to track. So we've got Charles Dickens, for example, who you're going to hear a bit more about quite soon. Most of these are Russian because that's what I was tracking, but I've reached the limit of what I can do with this app. I can't remember what it's called, but I'll put a link to it in the description in case you want to do something similar. But yeah, Notion, please, come on, give us a wider zoom that we can actually make use of this. Right, so what else do we have? Russia and former Soviet Union, that's the genre because I like to track how many books I've read in that genre. That's really it. My Readwise has got a bit more 2025 recs. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about the recommendations that I have here, because some of these will feature in the questions to come. When I did my 1 year anniversary video for BookTube, I asked some of my favourite booktubers and friends if they could give me a recommendation, and I've put them all into this database, and I'm slowly going through them. I'm a bit disappointed with the progress I've made. So I've read only 2 of them out of however many there are, 12 or 13. So yeah, I should really get to more of them. Let's look at them in a gallery here. So yeah, I've read The Glutton, which was recommended by The Mild Rumpus, and I've read Nervous Conditions, recommended by Katie Lumsden. There's quite a few more to get to. So that's my stats. Let's move on to my goals. So I wrote these down for my beginning of the year video, and I've got maintain humanities Substack, which I've not done. So that comes under the disappointments section in the questions. Maintain crime and punishment read along. I did do that, and I finished it, although I was late. I didn't keep up with it as well as I would have liked, but I did get to the end of it. So I see that as a win. I've got Finish Realm of the Elderlings series, 8 books to go. So I finished the Tawnyman trilogy and then stopped. So I've read only 1 Realm of the Elderlings out of 8 this year, and here we are in the second half. Will I read the Rainwild Chronicles this year? We will see. No YouTube publishing gaps of longer than 14 days. Well, I failed at that once, but since I've been doing my Oblomov read-along, that has become less of a challenge, because at one point I was putting out daily updates. I've since slowed them down, and the way I'm doing it now is that the essays and videos go out unlisted on my Substack, so you can read them and watch the videos there, so my Substack subscribers get to see them first, and then on YouTube I'm putting them out 1 a week. And the reason for that is because that was all that was going out on my channel, and I felt that it was just too much to be putting out only Oblomov content and nothing else, so I changed my strategy for that when I got halfway through the book. Next goal was to write a review for each book. I haven't done that. I've got quite a backlog actually to catch up on, and it's something I would like to take more seriously. So hopefully I'll be able to pick that up as we go into the second half of the year. Slow down and take handwritten notes. Well, that's something that I have been doing, and I've been enjoying it a lot. Sitting with a Leuchtturm 1917 A5 journal, my fountain pens, and really having a good time actually, taking notes. And I'm also carrying in my cargo pocket, so this goes with me. Well, that's kind of funny. This goes with me everywhere, except it's not in my pocket. I think it's in my shorts. That's embarrassing. I keep a little travel notebook in my pocket with a pen and take notes when I'm out and about. So yeah, that goal has been well and truly achieved. Lead a Substack group for one Russian classic. So I did that. I did Oblomov, one of my all-time favourite books. This one here. And I completed it yesterday. I got my last essay out for part 4 of the book and my last video review, and we'll talk a bit more about that in the questions section. Follow Brothers Karamazov group. Well, I did do that, and that was another note-taking exercise, slow reading and making content. And then Dana, who was leading the Brothers Karamazov read-along on a Substack, disappeared. It's a bit worrying, because I've not heard from her. She was putting out regular, excellent content on Crime and Punishment at the same time that I was. And then she started the Brothers Karamazov read-along at the beginning of the year, and then in April she disappeared. So I've slowed down on the book because I had so many other reads. Oblomov was taking up so much of my time, but I still have the book to continue with. I'm just hoping Dana comes back. So if you're watching, Dana, I hope you're okay. And please come back. We would love to see you. I say we because she's got quite a big following now on her Substack. Next one, this is a bonus, was the Anna Karenina group. So this has been led by another Substack writer called Henry Elliott, and he's doing it as a slow read on his channel, where we're reading sections of the book on a timeline which matches the time that the sections of the book were published originally in a Russian journal called the Russian Messenger. So that's been great, really slow, and taking notes again and making video content on it has been very rewarding. So that's been great. Moby Dick group, that was another one that I was thinking of joining. Brock Covington on his Patreon, he was reading it in June, but as I said, June I was busy with Oblomov and there was just no way. So yeah, those are my goals. Oh no, there's one more, which was to participate in Historathon 2025. I did read two, perhaps three that come to mind. Historathon 2025 is being run by, forget his name, I should have looked this up, sorry, whatever your name is. But you read a history book from 4 different time periods, one each quarter, and I've kind of fallen off that, so that's okay. You know, I've read some history books, I've got plenty more to go, but they're mainly Soviet and Russian, so we're looking at the same kind of time period because that's the time period I like to read about. Fascinated by the Russian Revolution and the aftermath. So there we go, goals. Now let's take a look at the questions. Question 1. What is the best book you've read so far? So notice that it's singular. So, I mean, you don't ask a reader what his favourite book is, do you? So, first of all, I've got a non-fiction book, which is Stalin's Children. Did I bring it over? No, I didn't. I've reviewed this on my channel at length, so you can go and watch that review. But long story short, it's written by Owen Matthews and is a memoir of his family. It follows the life of his grandfather, who was a Russian dissident, who's a Russian intellectual, who became part of the party structure and was then purged in 1937, so killed by Stalin. And the author, Owen Matthews, went back to Ukraine and found his grandfather's file and went through that, and it's a very moving and touching memoir of how Owen Matthews came to be in the world, you know. So his grandfather was purged. His grandfather's 2 daughters were part of the orphanage system. They survived the Great Patriotic War. They had very, very difficult upbringings, as you will imagine, and Matthews goes into it in quite some detail, looking back at interviews with his family and documents that he's found from the archives, and it's so moving. So obviously his mother was Russian born, his father was Welsh born, and he ended up, for some reason that I don't even think Owen Matthews knows, his father became a Russophile and was fascinated with the language and the history and the culture, something I can relate to. And he went over to study as a student. He got an exchange program when he was based in Moscow, and he ended up meeting his wife-to-be. They fell in love, And then we follow the story of their multi-year attempts at getting married, because it was a difficult thing to do. And it works out, it's no spoiler, because it's written by their son, Owen, who himself became a Russophile and has written many books and articles, etc. He studied the region in depth and continues to do so. And he came onto my radar by being on a podcast, which was Planet Normal, and he was discussing the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Through that, I discovered another of his books, which is the first one of his I read, which is called Overreach, which is a history of the conflict, which goes into the lives of Putin, which I know quite a bit about, and also Zelensky, which I knew nothing about, so that was fascinating to read about. And through that, I discovered I already had Stalin's Children on the shelf and had forgotten, so I pulled that off the shelf and read it, and it's one of my best reads of 2025. Fiction? Oblomov. You won't be surprised. This is my third read of this novel, and I read it as a student for the first time back in 1993 or 4, when I was in first year at St Andrews University studying Russian language and literature. At that time, my education level was not very high. I mean, obviously, because I was in first year at uni, so that tells you what my education level was. But in terms of essay writing and studying literature, my Russian language was okay, but my literary skills were very poor. And this was the only book, really through the whole of the 5 years I was a student, that resonated with me on such a level. And I think it's because I could relate to the character, Oblomov. So this was written, or it was published in 1859, and it's about the main character, Ilya Ilyich Oblomov, who suffers from lethargy, or, to use modern terms, there's some neurodiversity going on with this character. That's my belief. ADHD or autism or some kind of executive dysfunction. But in the novel it was called Oblomovitis or Oblomovism. And in this particular translation by Stephen Pearl, which I hadn't read before, he calls the condition Oblomovshchina, which is what the Russian title for it is. So he's chosen to transliterate rather than transcribe. And it's a genius move, I think, because when I was starting the book group, which I led over May and June, one of the questions I had in my mind was, what am I going to use to refer to this term, Oblomovitis or Oblomovism? And neither really appealed to me, but I knew I was going to have to use one, and it turns out I didn't. I got to use Oblomovshchina, and I think that was a great move. So, relating to this character, relating to the love that he feels, and to his friend who's half Russian, half German, and Goncharov has used this character as a contrast to Oblomov. Oblomov is a landowner who has serfs on his land. He's got income from his land, and it's kind of a critique on the system of serfdom. So, as I said, 1859 it was published. The serfs were emancipated in 1861. So we were quite close to that happening, and I find it fascinating. In fact, there's more about that in Anna Karenina, where Levin has discussions with landowners about serfdom. And I can just imagine, if you think about the discussions we're having in our own time, with politics and divisiveness and left versus right and any kind of political discussion you could think of. And then I put myself back in time and imagined that going on in Russia in 1860 about serfdom. There would be discussions around the dinner table, there would be fallings out, divisiveness, and it really, I don't know, it put me in that place and time in a way that I've never really been able to do before. So for that reason as well, I just found this absolutely fascinating. I've talked at length about it chapter by chapter on my channel, so you can go and check those videos out if you're interested and you fancy reading the book and hearing my analysis as you go. So, Oblomov. The next fiction book, so you'll see I've picked 3. I'm going to go with A Disaffection by James Kelman. James Kelman is a Scots author who writes in the Scots language, and this was a book that I read for the first time in 1995-96 when I was in Odessa, Ukraine for a year as part of my university degree. I was studying language and culture and history while I was living in Odessa, and I spent a lot of time visiting the British Council Library. And it was in there that I first saw this James Kelman book and took it back to my flat and read it and loved it and became a James Kelman fan. And somehow the book came into my head again this year, so I bought myself a used copy and reread it. Wow, what an amazing book. It's a slice of life spread out over 4 days in Glasgow. It follows the life of a young teacher who is disaffected with the political system of the day and also with his job, which is kind of, they're intertwined, aren't they? Because the government dictates the education system, etc. And so he's in a state school in Glasgow, not having a great time, and we just follow his life over these 4 days as he leaves school. He's in love with a fellow teacher who's married. So we go through that, how he goes to the pub with her and all his thoughts is in her monologues, and it's all written in my tongue because I only come from 30 miles away from Glasgow, not even. So I grew up speaking this language and I had no trouble whatsoever, obviously, reading the dialogue. Some of you probably would have a bit of bother with it if you're not familiar with the Scots tongue. A bit like watching Trainspotting, But Kelman's writing, it's so evocative of time and place and the character studies in his books. I've read another of his books also called How Late It Was, How Late. I've read that a couple of times. I should read more, and I plan to, because I just love it. So there we go. Sorry about picking 3 books for a 1-book question, but, I'm on BookTube. What do you expect? Right, question 2. What is the best sequel you've read so far? Okay, once again, I'm going to give you a 3-book answer for a 1-book question. Sorry, not sorry. The first one I've got is The Drawing of the Three by Stephen King, which is the 2nd book in the Dark Tower series. This is my 2nd read of that book, and I'm planning to go through the rest of them while listening to the Kingslingers podcast. So I'm having a great time with it. I'd forgotten how good this book was. I read The Gunslinger again last year and it took me that long to get to The Drawing of the Three. It's just one that I grabbed off the shelf when the mood took me, and before I knew where I was off having a great time. It doesn't advance the plot really at all of the journey to the Dark Tower. It introduces new characters, so 3 new characters. In a way, 3 or 4, depends how you want to read it, and it's really about the gunslinger Roland building his quartet, which is his group of companions that are going to go with him to the Dark Tower through the rest of the books. So loved it. Another sequel, Fool's Fate, which is the 3rd book in the Tawnyman trilogy. I read that with another booktuber called Ray. Ray loves to read, and I had a great time with it. It's the first time I'd read that trilogy. I'd read the previous 2 trilogies at least twice, and for some reason stopped because, the first time I stopped because the Tawnyman hadn't been published. So this time I carried on, and I'm planning to read the rest of them very soon, as I discussed in my stats and goals at the beginning of the video. So yeah, highly recommend. The Tawnyman trilogy, Just the whole thing is just absolutely brilliant. Robin Hobb is one of my favourite authors. So that's why for that question. And the third one is Greenwich, which is by Susan Cooper. It's the third of the five book series called The Dark is Rising sequence by Susan Cooper. I started reading it last year, the sequence, and this year read Greenwich and I actually didn't get on with it that well. And then I carried on with the next books, The Grey King and Silver on the Tree. And I've done a whole video about the whole series, so you can go and watch that. If am I going to get that right for the first time ever? Point to the right side. Yeah, for some reason Greenwich, I think it was because I was in an audiobook slump, and as I was out and about walking the dog, listening to Greenwich, it wasn't sinking in. So when I got home, actually after I'd finished the whole series, and I started looking at other people's reviews, and quite a lot of people said that Greenwich was their favourite from the series, and I was like, what? What am I missing here? So I went back and read the physical copy, and yeah, it made a big difference. I love the quintessential Englishness of it. I love that one of the characters who up till now hadn't had much of a role to play, Susan. Is it Susan? No, Susan's the author. I can't remember the characters' names now. Barney. Yeah, my memory is pretty bad. But yeah, the girl character, she really comes to the fore in this book, and we get some paganism and we get some wood, hawthorn and rowan and hazel, and I just love those words and what they evoke. And the Greenwich herself is an effigy who's made by the women in the village in Cornwall where they are on holiday. And the girl gets invited into this ceremony, which is unusual. It's normally locals only. So she gets to see the ceremony. She gets to be part of the building of the Greenwich out of these woods. And yeah, I just loved it. So sequels. Okay, this is going to be a long video. Wait, what is a new release you haven't read yet but want to? Well, this one is a recommendation from an email that I get through, I think it's bookshop.org. Muckle Fluga by Michael Pedersen. I don't really know much about it other than what I've read online. I'll read you the blurb. As spring canters into summer and the sun kilts its shadows across the concrete, there's fresh reading lists popping up everywhere, like batches of bluebells in floral defiance of their concrete overlords. In amongst this sturdy crop, my new and debut novel, Muckle Flugga. It's a novel of landscape and lore, old bonds up against new, strange surfacings in the deep and celestial secrets. At the belly of it all are the people who dwell there, denizens both old and new. The often painful love between the lighthouse keeper and his otherworldly son Ooze is put to the ultimate test by the arrival of a visitor who sweeps in from the capital full of big promises and sensational stories. The lighthouse that sits upon the northern hump of this rugged island is muckle and massive, shades of Gormenghast with a sliver of something more sentient still. The less said about the lingering ghost of Robert Louis Stevenson, the better. Long live love and lighthouses, Michael Pedersen. So it mentions Gormenghast. Of course, I'm going to pick that as something to read. Right, next question 4. What is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? Right, this one was a recommendation from Henry Elliott, who I've mentioned as being the writer of the Substack, where we're following the Anna Karenina read-along. I think he works for Faber and Faber. We'll get onto that in a minute because Mrs. Dalloway. So he's recommended this book, which is a re-release published in 1961. So does that count as an anticipated release? I'm going to allow it. It's called The Ha-Ha by Jennifer Dawson, and it's due to be released, I think, next month But then I checked Goodreads and it said November, so I'm not entirely sure. I have to let the cat in, excuse me. I'll just read you the blurb, shall I? A tea party at an Oxford college. Earnest undergraduates in floral dresses clink cups, discussing essay crisis, punting, summer balls. But to one student they are grotesquely transformed. She is sitting among ominous armadillos with scaly shells, buzzing with black flies. Then the laughter comes. As she is engulfed by mirthless hysterics, the principal has no choice but to send her away. Josephine's entrance into the world of other people wasn't what she imagined. Since her mother's death, reality seems a badly painted canvas. She always thinks the wrong things, cowed by the brightness of existence. It is a relief to belong for once within the mental institution where she is taken, but eventually she must reintegrate with society, and through a transformative encounter with a fellow patient, a return to real life seems possible. I just think that sounds lovely, and a book about mental health and academic institutions sounds right up my street. Come on, Willow. I've got Willow in my lap. Question 5. What has been your biggest disappointment? Again, I've got two books actually. First one is The Iliad by Homer. Why is that a disappointment? Well, I expected great things actually. I read The Odyssey last year and loved it. It was Emily Wilson's translation. And I also read Stephen Fry's Odyssey, the retelling of the story, following which I read Troy by Stephen Fry. And again, loved the story. It was fantastic. So naturally, I expected to enjoy The Iliad. It was being led again by a Substack writer called Matthew Long, whose Substack is called Beyond the Bookshelf. And his essays were fantastic. I think without his essays I would probably have DNF'd the book. But as his essays were so good, they really helped me to get something out of the chapters I was reading. But honestly, it's not a book I think I'll go back to. It just bored me. Fight. Like, yeah. So, yeah, that was a surprise, a disappointment. Willow's just moved my mouse, so I don't know where I am. Yeah, the next disappointment is The Lost History of Liberalism by Helena Rosenblatt. I struggle a bit with understanding politics, and a few years ago I started trying to understand what liberalism means, what conservatism means, what are they, political ideologies, I don't know what you would call them. And so I read a book by Patrick J. Deneen, forget the name of it, something about liberalism. I read one by Yoram Hazony about conservatism, and still wasn't really any closer to... No, actually it's a lie. I was closer to understanding what they meant, but I still didn't really have a grasp on liberalism. What's the difference between libertarianism and liberalism? You know, those kind of questions are things that I feel I should understand better than I do. So I read the book, and it was maybe an audiobook slump thing. Again, I don't know, but I struggled with it, and I came away without really having much of a better idea about what liberalism is. So, yeah, a bit of a disappointment. It was a read-along for the Historathon Discord server, and I haven't really checked it since to see how other people liked it or what they thought. So, and then I suppose as disappointments go, bailing on my humanities read-along. I'd planned to do it over 2 years to read a book from Ted Gioia's humanities list, and yeah, I bailed. He was planning a 52-week list, and he gave us 250 pages to read from different humanities books, and the list looked like something that would be brilliant for my education, but I ended up falling off it. I just couldn't keep up with it, so I'm disappointed, but I feel it was the right move. Question 6. What has been your biggest surprise? There are a few, so I'll try and keep it brief. First of all, the recommendations from my anniversary video have led to some nice surprises. We've got this one, The Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangaremga, and we've got The Glutton. So those are the two books I've read out of however many it was that were recommended to me. That's a great way of getting some new literature, actually, is getting recommendations on your channel. So I'm looking forward to reading the rest of them. Doomakey by Stephen King. I mean, surprise in as much as it was a mood read, and I walked out the room, saw it on the shelf, pulled it off the shelf, and it's possibly one of the reads of the year. I'm a big fan of Stephen King, and I hadn't read that one. I got it for £1 from a charity or a used bookshop, and yeah, loved it. The Land in Winter by Andrew Miller, which I just finished this morning. This was a surprise because I was driving about midnight in Argyll and I turned on Radio 4, and there was a radio programme where the author Andrew Miller was being interviewed as part of the Hay Book Festival on a Radio 4 show called Take 4 Books. And you know what it's like at night, driving in the dark with the windscreen wipers going and the radio on. It's just such a comforting situation to be in. So listening to that broadcast made me want to read the book. So I got it out of the library, and yeah, brilliant, loved it. Not the kind of thing I would normally read, so actually now it is, because I'm going to get more of his books. And Mrs. Dalloway, which was surprising because it was another read-along that Henry Elliott announced in June. Apparently the middle Wednesday in June is known as Dallow Day, and that's because that's when Mrs. Dalloway is set. So it's set over a day, and it follows Mrs. Dalloway as she gets ready for a party. And I had read one Virginia Woolf book, but it was a long time ago, The Voyage Out, and I think I bought Mrs. Dalloway after that. So this would have been when I got back from Ukraine in 1996, and I loved The Voyage Out, so I bought Mrs. Dalloway and then proceeded not to read it for 30 years. So yeah, it was a surprise because I just didn't see it coming, and then Henry Elliott was like, hey, let's do this. I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, brilliant book, and I think I'll probably do it every year on Dallow Day, because it's not a long book, and I would like to read it again because the prose is just beautiful. Number 7, who is your favourite new author, debut or new to you? So I'm going to go with Andrew Miller for reasons which I've already discussed. And the second author in favourite new to me is Owen Matthews, again for reasons which we've already discussed. I've read 2 of his books this year and loved both of them. Question 8, who is your newest fictional crush? So I'm going to go with Mrs. Dalloway. I would love to meet her, to sit down with her and have a cup of tea. I'd like to get to know her more. So for that reason I'll be reading the book again, because she's an amazing character. And I'm going to pick another one, which is Rita from The Land in Winter. Rita, it follows the story of 2 families, 2 couples, and it's set in the cold spell in 1963, January. And the 2 couples have some issues with their relationships. Both of the women are pregnant, and one of them is called Rita. She marries a farmer, or a man who becomes a farmer, who was a student at Oxford and then buys a farm in Somerset, I think it is. And we follow him as he learns how to become a farmer, and it's not set over a great spell of time, it's only a couple of months. And his wife Rita, there are scenes where she's sitting in the kitchen with her on the floor, on a cushion on the floor, with her back against the Aga for heat, and reading a sci-fi book with a cup of tea, a packet of cigarettes and an ashtray. And it was just such a vivid scene in this farmhouse kitchen with this pregnant woman sitting enjoying a fag and a cup of tea and a sci-fi novel, and I just thought, you sound like a cool character. So, crush, maybe? I don't know. Question 9, who is your newest favourite character? So that's kind of the same. I've got Mrs. Dalloway and I've got Rita from The Land in Winter. But two others, I've got Eddie Dean from The Drawing of the Three by Stephen King. He's the first of the three that we meet in that book, and when we meet him, he's in the midst of carrying drugs over from South America on a plane when Roland appears in his head, and he's an amazing character. I'm really looking forward to seeing how he develops in The Wastelands, the third book. And I've got one other, which is Tambudzai's Sagauke, which is not in Mrs. Dalloway. It's the main character from Nervous Conditions, who's a young girl. I think she's 13, and she's in Rhodesia. She's the daughter of a kind of poor family out in the sticks in Rhodesia, and she ends up being taken on board by her uncle, who's an educated man, a man who was educated in England and who runs a mission in Rhodesia, and the daughter ends up being taken on by him to be educated. And it's a Bildungsroman. There you go, how's that for a literary term? Coming of age story that follows this young girl as she becomes a young woman. And she's a fascinating character, so one of my newest favourite characters. And there are another 2 books to follow this, which I will probably read. The Book of Naught and This Mournable Body, which I believe won a prize. Yeah, it won the Commonwealth Writers' Prize in 1989. I think this one was published in 1988. So, it's not a new book, but it's new to me. And again, I'll remind you, it was recommended by Katie Lumsden over on Books and Things. Many more questions have we got? I didn't realise this was going to be quite so long. Question 10, what is a book that made you cry? Brackets, saddest book you have read. So for that I've picked The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I bought this as a birthday present for my daughter's 21st, and because I hadn't read it, and I don't like to give gifts if I haven't read them, I read it quite quickly. And great book, but boy oh boy, is it sad. What's a book that made you happy? Question 11. Bleak House by Charles Dickens. I want to read all of Charles Dickens, so maybe one a year. If I live long enough, I'll get through them all. That was a bit dark, wasn't it? But Bleak House follows many different characters, but some of them are just hilarious. There's a guy who thinks he's a child, and so I can't remember their names, having finished it in March. All the characters have now left my head. It's a bit poor, isn't it? But the book did make me happy. I thoroughly enjoyed it, particularly as I was going through Katie Lumsden's vlogs, because she put out chapter analysis as I was going, and I just loved it. So that book made me happy. What's your favourite book to film adaptation that you saw this year? Question 12. 2 of them, Handmaid's Tale and Silo. We are now just starting season 5 of A Handmaid's Tale. Elizabeth Moss, man, she is so good. I read the book this year, I think after I'd finished season 1, and I think I prefer the TV show, to be honest. Once again, though, it was part of that audiobook slump, so I would like to go back and read it again in physical format, as well as the sequel, The Testament. And Silo, yeah, again, I think I preferred the TV show to the book. I've read the first 2, what are they, Dust and Wool? Was it the other way around? I think it's Wool and then Dust. Yeah, good books, not bad, but Rebecca Ferguson in that TV show, she was just amazing. So those are 2. Question 13, what is your favourite video that you have made this year? It's going to be the last video in my Oblomov series, not because it was a brilliant video or anything, but because I was proud of myself for having achieved the goal of leading a group through the book in 2 months and keeping on top of the schedule for publishing essays and making video content. So yeah, it was an achievement and I'm celebrating it as a win. So that's why that was my favourite video this year. Question 14, what is the most beautiful book you've bought or received this year? Okay, first up I've got The Dark is Rising sequence. I bought these new covers because the original old covers I have and love and covet are not in the best condition, and when I was rereading Greenwich, remember I discussed picking up the physical book and it kind of broke, the spine broke, which upset me so much that I went and bought these, and I just love the covers on these. These are illustrated by Joe McLaren. The originals I have are by, I think, Michael Heslop. Yeah, Michael Heslop. So these are the originals. This is my Greenwich that I broke the spine on. Not good. So yeah, I got these other ones and I just love the covers. I think they're fantastic. So that's that. The second one is The Bell Jar, which I bought a really nice illustrated edition and then sent it to my daughter, so I hope she's enjoying it. And the third one is, I think I bought this in December last year, but I'm going to sneak it in. It's a 3-volume set of Gormenghast, the trilogy, illustrated by the author Mervyn Peake. So this is a gorgeous, gorgeous book. And I'm actually thinking about doing a read-along of this because it will surprise people on my Substack who think I'm all about Russian literature and nothing else. This would be such fun to read with a group. The writing is exquisite, and to have this illustrated copy would make it extra special. 15. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? Well, how long have you got? I've got these two which are not on my TBR, On Writing by Stephen King and Dust and Light by Andrea Barrett. So these I want to read because I want to write. So those aren't on my TBR. Let's take a look at my TBR, which I made at the beginning of the year, and I'll tell you what's still on it and what I'm hoping to read this year. So first of all, we've got the other recommendations. Alright, so we've got The Wager, A Hero Was Born, The Sea Wolf, We've Always Lived in the Castle, Dungeon Crawler Carl, The Lost Story, Empire of Silence, The Way of Idan, Arrangements in Blue, Anathem, Sons of Darkness, and then the other two I've already read. Besides that, we've got The Brothers Karamazov, which I'm reading with Dana if she comes back, Anna Karenina with Henry Elliott, Piranesi, The White Guard, The Gulag Archipelago, London Fields, Moby Dick, East of Eden, Exhalation, The Will of the Many, Jude the Obscure, The Grace of Kings, Sons of Darkness, which I've already mentioned, and The Dance of Shadows. So I think I'll get through all that this year. If I stop mood reading, perhaps I will. And that's me at the end of the questions. Holy heck, if you've got this far, you're a fan, and I thank you so much for your patronage, for watching this video. It means a lot. I'm looking forward to the second half of the year, and I hope you are too. So I will say goodbye and wish you all the very best.